I never expected a simple piece of paper to shatter my carefully constructed peace. But there it was, pinned to my front door with a black thumbtack, stark white against the dark wood, fluttering slightly in the autumn breeze. "This isn't over," it read in messy block letters. 3 words that sent ice through my veins and brought my past rushing back like a tidal wave. My name is Lila, and until today I thought I'd finally built the quiet life I'd always dreamed of. A cozy craftsman house in a peaceful neighborhood, a loving partner, and a job at the local library where the biggest drama usually involved overdue books. But that note changed everything. I stood there, keys dangling forgotten in my hand, staring at those 3 words until they burned into my memory. The street behind me was quiet, almost too quiet. Mrs. Peterson's wind chimes next door tinkled softly, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked. Normal sounds that suddenly felt ominous. My phone buzzed, making me jump. It was Ethan, my partner. "Hey babe, grabbing takeout from Ming's. Want your usual?" I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, that sounds good." I paused, debating whether to tell him about the note. "How long until you're home?" 20 minutes, tops. "Everything okay?" "You sound weird." "Just tired," I lied, hating myself for it. "See you soon." I pulled the thumbtack out and brought the note inside, laying it on our kitchen counter. The paper was cheap, the kind you'd find in any office supply store. Nothing distinctive about it, except for those threatening words and what they represented. My hands shook as I poured myself a glass of water. I knew exactly who had left this message. Ryan, Ethan's younger brother, had been acting strange ever since we inherited this house from Ethan's grandmother 6 months ago. He'd made snide comments about how unfair it was, how he and his wife Vanessa deserved it more. But I never thought he'd escalate things like this. The last family dinner replayed in my mind. Ryan's cold stare across the table, Vanessa's sugary sweet voice asking pointed questions about our renovation plans. "It must be nice," she'd said, twirling her wine glass, "having such a beautiful home just given to you." I'd spent years learning to control my reactions, to stay calm in the face of provocation. My past as a martial arts champion taught me that much, at least. But standing in my kitchen, staring at that note, I felt my carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. The sound of a car door slamming made me quickly shove the note into a drawer. Ethan walked in moments later, carrying bags of Chinese food and wearing his usual easy smile. "Got you extra spring rolls," he said, setting everything down and pulling me into a hug. I melted into his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent of coffee and cologne. Should I tell him? Would he believe me over his own brother? Questions churned in my stomach, souring my appetite. "You sure you're okay?" Ethan pulled back, studying my face with concern. "You look pale." The words caught in my throat as headlights swept across our front windows. Car was driving by slowly, too slowly. Through the curtains, I caught a glimpse of Ryan's black SUV. "Actually," I said, making a decision, "there's something we need to talk about." But before I could continue, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed my little message." There's more where that came from. The peaceful life I'd built was unraveling, and I had a choice to make. I could stay quiet and hope this would blow over, or I could fight back. As I looked at Ethan's worried face, I realized there really wasn't a choice at all. I'd fought too hard for this life to let anyone take it from me, even if that someone was family. I showed Ethan the note over our cooling Chinese food. His face darkened as he read it, then read it again. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. "You think Ryan did this?" He finally looked up, his expression a mix of doubt and worry that made my stomach clench. "Who else would it be?" I pushed my untouched spring rolls around with my chopsticks. "You saw how he acted at the reading of the will. How he's been acting ever since." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd grown to recognize. "Ryan can be difficult but threatening notes? That's not his style." "Then whose style is it?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Because someone clearly has a problem with us being in this house. Maybe we should. Ethan was cut off by the sound of tires on gravel. Through our dining room window, I watched Ryan's black SUV pull into our driveway. Again. Perfect timing, I muttered, standing up. But Ethan caught my wrist. Let me handle this, he said softly. He's my brother. That's exactly the problem, I wanted to say. Instead, I nodded and followed him to the door. Ryan and Vanessa stood on our porch like they owned it. Vanessa wore her usual perfectly coordinated outfit and artificial smile, while Ryan lounged against the railing with forced casualness. Hope we're not interrupting dinner, Vanessa chirped, peering past us into the house. We were just driving by and thought we'd stop in. For the second time today. Actually, we were in the middle of something, I started, but Ethan was already stepping aside to let them in. No problem, he said. Come on in. I watched them walk into my home, our home, and felt my martial arts training kick in automatically. Analyzing positions, watching movements, staying aware of exits. Old hobbits die hard. Love what you've done with Grandma's china cabinet, Vanessa said, running her finger along the antique wood. Though it's such a shame to change anything. This house has so much history. The way she emphasized that last word made my skin crawl. What brings you by? I asked directly, ignoring Ethan's warning glance. Ryan sprawled on our couch, his boots on our coffee table. Can a guy visit his big brother? Besides, Vanessa and I have been talking about the neighborhood. Thinking about maybe moving closer. Closer? The word stuck in my throat. Vanessa nodded, still wandering the room like a realtor sizing up a property. This street has such potential. The right people could really make something of these old houses. I caught the emphasis on right people and felt my hands curl into fists. Ethan must have noticed because he quickly jumped in. That's great, but maybe we could discuss this another time? Lila and I were actually in the middle of an important conversation. Oh. Ryan's eyes locked onto mine. Anything interesting? The note burned in my pocket where I'd stuffed it earlier. I met his stare, remembering years of competition, of knowing exactly when someone was testing my defenses. Just house stuff, I said evenly. Speaking of which, how's that fixer-upper you bought last year coming along? Vanessa's smile flickered. Their investment property had turned into a money pit, and everyone knew it. It's progressing, she said tightly. Though some people just have all the luck, don't they? Getting a move-in ready house just handed to them. Tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Ethan shifted uncomfortably between us, torn between family loyalty and defending our home. Nothing was handed to us, I said quietly. Grandma Carter made her choice. Did she? Ryan stood suddenly. Or did someone help her make it? Ryan, Ethan warned, but his brother was already heading for the door, Vanessa close behind. Thanks for the lovely visit, she called over her shoulder. We should do this more often. After all, we're family. After they left, Ethan and I stood in silence, listening to their car pull away. Chinese food was completely cold now, forgotten on the kitchen counter. Still think Ryan didn't write that note? I asked. Ethan didn't answer, and somehow that hurt more than any threat could. The next morning at the library, I found another note tucked inside the book I'd been reading during my lunch break. You don't belong here. Never did. The handwriting matched the first note perfectly. My hands trembled as I stared at the words. Someone had been watching me, waiting for the right moment. Quiet sanctuary of my workplace suddenly felt exposed, vulnerable. Earth to Lila. Mia's voice made me jump. She peered over my shoulder, her usual cheerful expression falling as she caught sight of the note. What's that? I quickly folded the paper and shoved it into my pocket. Nothing. Just. Don't you dare say nothing. Mia pulled me into the biography section, away from prying eyes. You've been jumpy all morning and now this? Talk to me. Before I could respond, the sharp click of heels on hardwood announced Vanessa's arrival. She rounded the corner like she owned the place, designer purse swinging from her arm. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. The librarians having their little chat. "We're working," I said flatly, turning away. "Oh, I'm sure you are." Vanessa's voice dropped lower. "Working on how to keep that house, right? Must be exhausting, always looking over your shoulder." My spine stiffened. Mia stepped closer to me, protective. "Is there something we can help you find, Vanessa?" Mia asked pointedly. "Actually, yes." Vanessa pulled out a thick folder. "I've been researching property laws. Fascinating stuff. Did you know there are all sorts of ways a will can be questioned?" The threat hung in the air between us. I thought of Grandma Carter's final months. How she'd insisted I move in to help care for her while Ryan and Vanessa were too busy with their investment opportunities. "The will was perfectly legal," I said quietly. "Everything was witnessed and notarized." "Legal doesn't always mean right." Vanessa leafed through her folder. "For instance, when an elderly woman suddenly changes her will after her grandson's girlfriend moves in, well, people might wonder about undue influence." My chest tightened. "Is that what you're telling people?" "I'm not telling anyone anything." Her smile turned predatory. "Yet?" "That's enough." Mia's voice was sharp. "This is a library, not a courthouse. Take your threats somewhere else." Vanessa's facade cracked for just a moment, revealing something desperate underneath. "You think you've won, don't you? Playing the perfect caretaker, the devoted granddaughter-in-law? Some of us had to work for everything we have. Like that falling apart house you can't afford to fix?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Vanessa slammed the folder down on a nearby table, making several patrons jump. "You have no idea what it's like, watching everything handed to you while we struggle. That house should have been split equally. Ryan is family. You're just convenient." The old me would have responded differently. Would have shown her exactly how convenient I could be. Instead, I took a slow, steady breath. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Or what?" She stepped closer. "You'll call security? Have me banned from the public library? That would make a great story for the neighborhood gossips." My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Ethan wondering why I wasn't answering his texts. But I couldn't look away from Vanessa's challenge. "You want the truth?" I kept my voice low. "Grandma Carter left us the house because she knew what you and Ryan would do with it. Flip it for quick cash like every other property you've ruined. She wanted it preserved, not destroyed." Color flooded Vanessa's cheeks. For a moment, I thought she might actually strike me. Instead, she gathered her folder with shaking hands. "This isn't over," she hissed, the exact words from the first note. After she stormed out, Mia grabbed my arm. "Okay, spill. What's really going on?" I pulled out both notes, watching my friend's eyes widen as she read them. "Have you told Ethan? He doesn't want to believe his brother could do this." I leaned against the shelves, suddenly exhausted. And maybe he's right. Maybe I'm paranoid. Or maybe, Mia said slowly, you need to stop playing nice and start playing smart. She was right. I'd been trying so hard to leave my past behind, to be the perfect partner and librarian, that I'd forgotten something crucial. Sometimes peace comes at a price. And I knew exactly how to make them pay it. After the confrontation at the library, I spent hours researching Ryan and Vanessa's failed property ventures. Public records told a story of mounting debt and desperate refinancing. But it was a social media notification that made my blood run cold. Someone had tagged Vanessa in photos from my old competition days. They knew. I stared at the images of my younger self on the martial arts circuit, trophies in hand, victory written across my face. The life I'd walked away from was now ammunition in their hands. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Nice roundhouse kick." Shame about that career-ending injury. Or was it? The walls of our cozy living room suddenly felt like they were closing in. I hadn't told Ethan everything about my past, about why I'd really left competitive fighting. Some secrets were better left buried. The front door opened and I quickly closed the browser. Ethan walked in, looking troubled. "Ryan called," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "He wants to meet. Says he has information about the house that might interest us." "What kind of information?" "He wouldn't say. Just that it's important." Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe we should hear him out." "Like we've heard him out about his last investment opportunity?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "The one that cost you $5,000? That was different." But his shoulders sagged. "He's still my brother, Lila." Before I could respond, another text came through. "Ask Ethan about the original will. The one from before you moved in." My heart stopped. "Ethan," I said carefully, "was there another will?" His silence was answer enough. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it doesn't matter." He finally looked at me. "Grandma changed it legally. She wanted you to have this place. But originally it was supposed to go to Ryan, wasn't it?" A knock at the door saved him from answering. Through the window, I saw a familiar face I hadn't seen in years. Jax Reynolds, my old training partner. "Expecting someone?" Ethan asked. I shook my head, moving to open the door. Jax stood there, looking more polished than I remembered in a business suit, but with the same calculating eyes. "Long time no see, champ," he said easily. "Mind the ficomein?" Then tensed beside me. "Who's this?" "An old friend," I said, though friend wasn't exactly the right word. "What are you doing here, Jax?" He stepped inside, taking in our home with an appraising look. "Heard you might need some help. Ryan Carter's been asking questions about you around town." "Interesting questions." My stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that make me think he's digging for dirt." Jax's smile was sharp. "Good thing I know where all the bodies are buried, right?" Then moved closer to me. "Is that a threat?" "Actually," Jax pulled out his business card, Community Development Director. "It's an offer of help. Ryan's been trying to push through some questionable permits for his properties. It would be a shame if someone looked too closely at those applications." I studied my old teammate, trying to read his angle. "Why would you help me?" "Let's just say I owe you one." His eyes flickered to my left knee, the injury that ended everything. "And I don't like bullies." Another text buzzed in my pocket. "Time's running out. Meet tonight or the truth comes out." I looked between Ethan's worried face and Jax's knowing smirk. The past and present were colliding, and I had to choose, keep playing defense or finally strike back. "Tell me about those permits," I said to Jax. "Sometimes the best defense is a good offense." "An offense?" That was something I knew very well. "Lila," Ethan started, but I held up my hand. "No more secrets," I said firmly. "From any of us. It's time to end this." The weight of my past pressed against my chest, but for the first time since finding that first note, I felt steady. Ready. Let them come. I wasn't looking for a fight when I went for my evening run, but there was Ryan, leaning against my car in the library parking lot after closing. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty lot. Perfect timing for an ambush. "Thought you'd want these back," he said, holding up a stack of photographs. Even from several feet away, I recognized them, shots from my competition days, including one from my last match. The one that ended everything. "Where did you get those?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart raced. "Amazing what you can find online." He flipped through them casually. "You were quite the champion. Until that unfortunate accident." His smile turned cruel. Or should I say arrangement? My hands curled into fists. "What do you want, Ryan?" "Detrut." He pushed off my car, moving closer. "About how you manipulated my grandmother." About the real reason you quit fighting. About everything. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? He pulled out his phone. Because I have some interesting messages here from your old sponsor. He remembers that night very clearly. The memory flashed unbidden. The pressure to throw the fight, the threats, the choice I made that cost me everything. Everything except my integrity. Is that what this is about? I stepped forward. You're trying to blackmail me? I prefer to think of it as negotiation. Ryan's confidence wavered slightly as I moved closer. The house for your secrets. Simple trade. Nothing's ever simple with you. I was close enough now to see the sweat on his forehead. Does Ethan know you're here? Ethan needs to understand what kind of person you really are. That's when I saw Vanessa in her SUV, phone raised, recording everything. Of course, they wanted me to snap to prove I was still violent, still dangerous. But I wasn't that person anymore. Or at least I thought I wasn't. Last chance, Ryan said, dropping the photos at my feet. Sign over the house or everyone learns the truth. I looked at the scattered photos, at my younger self frozen in moments of victory. Then I looked at Ryan, really looked at him, the desperate gleam in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. He was terrified. You want the truth? Kept my voice low, controlled. Here it is. I didn't manipulate your grandmother. She saw through you both long before I came along. She knew about the gambling debts, the failed schemes, the money you borrowed from her savings. Ryan's face paled. That's a lie. Is it? Should we ask Jax about those permit applications? The ones with forged signatures? He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You don't know anything. Years of training kicked in automatically. One fluid movement and Ryan was on the ground, my knee pressed firmly between his shoulder blades. I heard Vanessa scream, car doors slamming. I know everything, I said quietly, holding him down with minimal effort. Every debt, every scheme, every lie. Your grandmother knew too. That's why she changed her will. Let him go. Vanessa was running towards us, phone still recording. You're proving everything we said about you. I released Ryan and stepped back, keeping my stance ready. He scrambled up, face red with rage and humiliation. You're done, he spat. When Ethan sees this. When I see what? We all turned. Ethan stood at the edge of the lot, expression unreadable. Behind him was Jax, holding a thick folder. Perfect timing, Jax said, smiling. I was just coming to discuss those permit applications with Ryan. And look, we have witnesses. Color drained from Ryan's face. Vanessa's phone lowered slowly. Ethan, Ryan started, but his brother held up a hand. I saw everything, he said quietly. And I heard everything. He moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. It's over, Ryan. All of it. Choice I'd made years ago, to walk away rather than compromise my principles, had cost me a career. But standing there, feeling Ethan's support, seeing Ryan and Vanessa's schemes crumbling, I knew I'd make the same choice again. Sometimes the biggest victories come from knowing when not to fight. But sometimes you have to show them exactly what you're capable of. Carter family gathering felt more like a powder keg waiting to explode. I watched from our kitchen as relatives filled the backyard, their cheerful conversations masking the tension underneath. Ethan squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that we had a plan. But plans have a way of falling apart. Ready? He asked, checking his phone where Jax's message waited. Documents in hand. On my way. I nodded, though my stomach churned. After the parking lot incident, Ryan and Vanessa had gone suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. Well, isn't this cozy? Vanessa's voice cut through the crowd as she and Ryan approached. She carried a thick manila envelope that made my skin crawl. Family all together, just like old times. Ryan wouldn't meet our eyes, but something in his stance set off warning bells in my head. He looked satisfied, like someone who knew they'd already won. Before everyone sits down, Vanessa announced loudly, we have something to share. She pulled documents from her envelope. Some interesting information about dear Lila's past. The chatter died down. I felt dozens of eyes turn toward me. Vanessa, Ethan started, but she spoke over him. Did you know your sweet librarian was involved in illegal betting? That she took money to throw fights? She smiled coldly. We have proof. My chest tightened. That's not. And that's not all, Ryan finally spoke, his voice carrying across the yard. We found something else. About Grandma's last days. Ethan stiffened beside me. This wasn't part of the plan. Turns out, Ryan continued, there were some interesting withdrawals from her accounts. Large ones. Right around the time Lila moved in to help care for her. The accusations hung in the air like poison. I saw doubt creep into the relatives' faces, heard their whispers. Show them the rest, Vanessa urged her husband, pulling out more papers. About how she manipulated. Stop. Ethan's voice cut through the tension. Just stop. Why? Ryan challenged. Afraid of the truth? About how your girlfriend stole what should have been mine. I waited for Ethan to defend me, to reveal what we knew about Ryan's schemes. Instead, he hesitated just for a moment. But that moment was enough. Ethan, I whispered. He looked between me and his brother, torn. I need to see those documents. The ground seemed to shift under my feet. After everything, after the parking lot, after all our planning, he still doubted me? You don't need to see anything, I said quietly. You just need to trust me. But he was already reaching for the papers Vanessa held out triumphantly. The same papers we'd planned to expose as forgeries when Jax arrived. My phone buzzed. Accident on May. Delayed 20 minutes. Hold them off. Too late. Oh my, Vanessa gasped theatrically as she read over Ethan's shoulder. These bank records. Lila, how could you? The documents were lies. I knew they were lies. But watching Ethan's face change as he read them, seeing the doubt creep in despite everything we'd been through. I can explain, I started, but the words felt hollow. How do you explain away carefully crafted lies when the truth sounds just as unbelievable? Ryan moved closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You should have taken the deal. Now you lose everything. I looked around at the judging faces, at Ethan still reading those poison papers, at the home I'd fought so hard to protect. Everything I'd built, everything I'd changed about myself, crumbling because of carefully constructed lies. I trusted you, Ethan finally said, his voice breaking. After everything with Ryan, I chose you. You still can, I whispered. Just wait. For what? Ryan interrupted. More lies? More manipulation? Crowd had grown silent, watching the drama unfold. I saw phones recording, faces I'd grown to love now twisted with suspicion and judgment. In that moment, I realized something terrible. Sometimes the truth doesn't matter. Sometimes the story people want to believe is stronger than reality. I turned and walked away, leaving behind the whispers, the accusations, and the man I loved still holding papers that told lies about me. Sometimes walking away isn't surrender, it's survival. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because while they were all focused on destroying my reputation, they'd forgotten something crucial. I hadn't survived this long by playing nice. I was halfway to my car when Jax's voice cut through the murmur of the gathering. Those are interesting documents you've got there, Ryan. Mind if I take a look? Crowd parted as Jax strode through, briefcase in hand, looking more like a prosecutor than a community development director. I turned back, watching Ryan's confident smirk falter. This is a private family matter, Vanessa said quickly, trying to gather the papers. Oh, I think it's very public. Jax opened his briefcase. Especially considering these forged permit applications with Ryan's signature. And these bank records showing mysterious deposits right after Grandma Carter's jewelry went missing. The whispers shifted. I saw heads turning, expressions changing. That's ridiculous, Ryan sputtered. You can't prove. Actually, I can. Jax pulled out more documents. See, when you started digging into Lila's past, you caught the attention of some interesting people. People who remembered your gambling debts, Ryan. People who kept very detailed records. Finn stepped forward, the false documents forgotten in his hands. What gambling debts? Tell them, Ryan, I said quietly. Tell them about the real reason you need this house so badly. Ryan's face had gone pale. Vanessa grabbed his arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his sleeve. Don't say anything. They're bluffing. Am I? Jax turned to the crowd. Mrs. Peterson, remember when your wedding rings disappeared during that dinner party? The one where Ryan helped clean up. The elderly neighbor gasped, hands flying to her chest. That's enough. Ryan lunged forward, but I was ready. One swift movement and he was on his knees, arm locked behind him, not hurting, just contained. Years of training made it look effortless. The truth, Ryan, I said firmly. All of it. Now. You don't understand, he gasped. The debts. They were going to hurt Vanessa. I had to do something. So you stole from your own grandmother? Finn's voice cracked. From our neighbors? I was going to pay it back. Ryan struggled against my hold. Once we got the house, we could sell it, start fresh. But you, he glared at me, you ruined everything. No, Ryan. I released him carefully. You did that yourself. Vanessa suddenly laughed, a sharp, desperate sound. You want the truth? Fine. We're broke. Worse than broke. Every property we bought is worthless. Every investment failed. And there you were, living in our house, playing happy families. It was never your house, a new voice said. We all turned to see Mia holding up her phone. And I have Grandma Carter's last video message to prove it. The screen showed the elderly woman in her hospital bed, clear-eyed and determined. I'm leaving the house to Ethan and Lila because they love it like I do. They'll preserve it, not sell it for quick cash like Ryan wants. I know about the stealing, the gambling. I'm not angry, just disappointed. The house needs protectors, not profiteers. Silence fell over the gathering. Ryan slumped, defeated. Vanessa's perfect mask cracked, tears streaming down her face. I trusted you, Ethan said to his brother. Even when the evidence was right in front of me, I wanted to believe in you. I never meant. Ryan stopped, looking lost. I didn't know how to ask for help. You still could, I said softly. But it starts with the truth. All of it. Ryan looked at me, then at Jax's documents, then at his wife. Something shifted in his expression, resignation, maybe, or relief. Okay, he whispered. Okay. As Ryan began to speak, confessing everything, I felt Ethan's hand slip into mine. An apology, an acknowledgement, a promise. Sometimes victory isn't about winning the fight. Sometimes it's about giving your opponent the chance to surrender with dignity, to choose truth over pride. I'd learned that lesson the hard way years ago in the ring. Now, watching Ryan finally face his demons, I realized that maybe some fights are won not by striking, but by standing firm until the truth has nowhere else to hide. The house would stay ours, but more importantly, the truth would stay too, all of it, mine and Ryan's both. 'Cause sometimes the only way forward is to stop running from your past and learn to walk with it instead. 6 months after the confrontation, I found another note in our mailbox. My hands didn't shake this time as I opened it, though my heart skipped when I recognized Ryan's handwriting. We're in Seattle now, it read. Starting over. Really starting over. Thank you for not pressing charges. For giving us a chance to make things right. I sat on our porch swing, the same spot where this all began, and finished reading. Ryan had entered rehab for his gambling addiction. Vanessa was working at a real estate firm, legitimately this time. They were in therapy, both together and separately. Everything okay? Ethan appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Old hobbits die hard. Your brother wrote. I handed him the letter. They're doing better. He read in silence, then settled beside me on the swing. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of Mrs. Peterson's roses. She'd finally forgiven us for all the drama after Ryan returned her wedding rings, along with a heartfelt apology. Do you ever regret it? Ethan asked quietly. Showing mercy instead of pressing charges? I thought about that moment after Ryan's confession when everyone expected me to demand justice, to make them pay for every threat, every lie. Instead, I'd offered a choice: face the consequences legally or take the chance to rebuild their lives somewhere else. No, I said finally. Some fights aren't worth winning if the victory costs too much. Ethan nodded, understanding what I meant. His relationship with Ryan was different now, cautious, fragile, but healing. Like a broken bone that needed time to mend properly. Jax called today, he mentioned, changing the subject. The community center wants you to teach self-defense classes. Said something about putting your skills to better use than throwing his brother-in-law around parking lots. I laughed, surprising myself. The sound echoed across our front yard, where neighborhood kids now played freely, no longer afraid of the scary librarian with the mysterious past. Maybe I will, I mused. It might be time to stop hiding who I am. You never had to hide, Ethan said softly. I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you did. Before I could respond, a car pulled into our driveway. Mia stepped out, carrying a folder of library event plans, while Jax followed with takeout bags. Family dinner? Mia called out, waving the folder. We can plan the summer reading program while we eat. Family. The words settled warmly in my chest. Not just Ethan now, but Mia and Jax too. Even Mrs. Peterson, who'd taken to leaving her famous apple pies on our porch every Sunday. As we moved inside, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Not just the librarian, not just the fighter, but something in between. Something whole. The house creaked softly around us, familiar and welcoming. Grandma Carter would have loved this, I thought. Not just preserving the building, but filling it with new life, new memories. Later that night, after our friends had left, I found one last surprise in Ryan's letter, a small key taped to the bottom of the page. Found this in our things, his postscript read. It belongs to Grandma's old jewelry box. The real one, not the decoy she kept on her dresser. Maybe you'll have better luck finding it than we did. I showed Ethan, watching his eyes light up with recognition. The attic, he said. She always told us the house had secrets, but only for those patient enough to discover them properly. Tomorrow we'd climb into the attic and search for that hidden box. Tomorrow we'd add another chapter to this house's story. But for now, I was content to sit with Ethan, listening to our home's quiet breathing, feeling the perfect balance between my past and present. The last light of day filtered through our windows, casting long shadows that looked almost like they were dancing. Somewhere in Seattle, Ryan and Vanessa were building a new life. Here, in this house that had seen both battle and peace, we were building something too. Not just a home, but a testament to the fact that sometimes the strongest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them find their way back to themselves.
I can still clearly recall my early years, including the sound of my dad's keys jingling as he got home from work, and the scent of his cologne. This is my story, and my name is Alice. Mom, Dad, and I were born into what you would consider a typical household. However, it was immediately apparent who I liked best. Dad. He was everything to me and my idol. I would wait for his automobile to arrive every day beside the window, pressing my nose against the glass. I would run to the door as soon as I spotted him, eager to embrace him. He'd pick me up and twirl me around, saying, "There's my little princess." I would laugh while pressing my forehead against his neck and inhaling that comforting, kind aroma. Mom. She was there, at least physically, but not so much emotionally. I would occasionally catch her staring at me with this strange face, as if I were a burden she hadn't agreed to. Dad, however, made up for it. We would take walks every evening, rain or shine. He would let me talk endlessly about my kindergarten day, point out various plants, or tell me about birds. The finest time was before bed. After tucking me in, Dad would take out a book and take us both to fantastical places. I would laugh or gasp at the appropriate points as his voice changed to fit each persona. But everything changed when I turned 5. I recall the day I was seated. Dad looked devastated. Mom looked relieved. Dad said, "Alice, honey," his voice breaking. "Mommy and Daddy are not going to be living together anymore." "Will you travel on business trips, for example?" I inquired, not understanding at first. Mom interrupted in a flat voice. "No, Alice, we are divorcing. You will be staying with your father, so don't worry. This is a better approach." I turned to face Dad, who was crying. I could feel him trembling as he drew me in. Even at age 5, I understood that nothing would ever be the same again, even though he assured me that everything would be well. I was devastated by the divorce, but Dad tried his best to normalize things. We relocated to an area with a decent school close by. I still recall the day we moved into our new home. "What do you think, Alice?" With hopeful eyes, Dad inquired. A knot formed in my throat as I gazed at the strange edifice. "It's big," I actually said. Dad got on his knees next to me. "I know it's different, sweetheart, but we'll make it our home together, okay?" I tried to be brave for him and nodded. I suppose the new school was all right. I missed my previous life, but I found some new pals. Dad made an effort to maintain our daily schedule, which included bedtime tales and nightly walks, but something had changed. His eyes had a melancholy in them that had never been before. Mom disappeared from my life like a phantom. Sometimes she would call, her voice unfocused and far away. She would inquire, "How's school, Alice?" But I could see she wasn't very interested in the response. She would occasionally take me out for a weekend. We were strangers compelled to spend time together, and it was always unpleasant. I had a wave of relief as soon as I walked through the door and saw Dad. When I was 6 years old, Dad sat me down one day and had a serious expression on his face. Using his hands to fidget, he continued, "Alice, honey, I've got some news. I have a new acquaintance. We're getting married, and her name is Sarah. Sarah is pleasant. I'm sure you'll enjoy her." I had no desire to like her. I wanted everything to remain the same, just Dad and me. However, life had other ideas. Our peaceful home was abruptly filled with change and noise when Sarah came in. She made an effort to be kind, asking too many questions, and smiled too brightly all the time. With a syrupy honey voice, she would ask, "Alice, sweetie, what would you like for dinner?" I would murmur, "Whatever," and withdraw to my room. Then the most significant shift of all occurred. I was watching TV in the living room when Dad and Sarah entered, beaming broadly. "Alice, we have wonderful news." Sarah poured, "You're going to be a big sister." With a smile on his face and a hand on Sarah's tummy, I glanced to Dad, expecting to see some indication that this was a joke. He remarked, "Isn't it great, princess? You'll have a little brother or sister to play with." On the inside, I wanted to scream, but I faked a grin. A baby? What was he doing? He loved me enough, didn't he? Months passed, and Sarah's belly grew bigger. Dad spent more and more time fussing over her, buying baby things, talking about names. I felt like I was fading into the background. The day the baby was born, I was left with a neighbor. When Dad finally came to get me, he looked exhausted but happy. "Come meet your baby brother, Alice," he said at the hospital. I peered into the crib at the tiny red-faced bundle. I looked at the baby, then at Dad, who was gazing at his new son with such love. It made my heart hurt. Life changed fast after Tommy was born. Dad was completely wrapped up in his new family, and I felt like I was fading into the background. The walks, the bedtime stories, the special moments, they all disappeared, replaced by diaper changes and late-night feedings. Sarah, my stepmother, barely hid her annoyance with me. I'd catch her giving me these looks like I was some unwanted house guest who'd overstayed my welcome. One day, I overheard her talking to Dad in the kitchen. "John, why don't we see if Alice's mother wants her back? It might be better for everyone." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Dad's voice was sharp when he replied, "Absolutely not. Alice is my daughter, and this is her home. I expect you to treat her like your own." After that, Sarah was careful not to say anything outright mean to me, but the damage was done. I knew where I stood in her eyes, a burden, an obstacle to her perfect little family. As the years went by, I learned to fend for myself. Dad was always busy with Tommy, teaching him to walk, to talk, attending his little league games. I grew up in the shadows, becoming fiercely independent out of necessity. High school graduation came and went. Dad, true to his word, paid for my college tuition. "It's from the money your mom's been sending all these years," he explained. "I've been saving it for your education." I was surprised. I'd assumed Mom had just disappeared from my life completely. But I was grateful for the chance to get away, to start fresh in a new city. College flew by. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. I graduated with a degree in financial management, feeling proud and accomplished. But when I returned home, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. The house felt different, smaller somehow. Sarah greeted me with a tight smile. "Oh, Alice, you're back. We weren't expecting you so soon." I left my bags upstairs only to find my childhood bedroom completely transformed. Where my bed used to be, there was now a treadmill. My desk had been replaced by a huge TV and gaming console. The walls, once covered in my posters, were now bare. Tommy needed a rec room, Sarah explained, not even trying to sound apologetic. "You can sleep on the couch in the living room. It's just temporary." Right, I stood there, staring at the stranger my room had become, feeling more out of place than ever. Right, I mumbled, temporary. The job search was tough, but I finally landed an entry-level position at a local firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Every night, I'd score apartment listings, looking for something, anything I could afford. "Maybe you could find a roommate," Dad suggested one evening in a rare moment of attention. "Split the rent." I nodded, adding another search parameter to my list. But decent, affordable apartments with potential roommates were hard to come by. So I stayed. Every morning, I'd wake up on that uncomfortable couch, tiptoe around Tommy's toys scattered across the living room floor, and head to work. Every evening, I'd come back to Sarah's cold stares and Dad's distracted nods. Months dragged on, and I was still stuck in limbo, sleeping on the couch and searching for a way out. Tommy had started high school, and suddenly the house was abuzz with excitement, but not for me. "John, darling," Sarah said one evening, her voice sickly sweet, "don't you think Tommy needs a car? All his friends are driving now." I nearly choked on my dinner. Tommy was barely 15, for crying out loud. Dad, ever the pushover when it came to his precious son, nodded. "You're right, honey. We'll go car shopping this weekend." And just like that, Tommy got a shiny new car. Never mind that he couldn't legally drive it yet. I bit my tongue, trying to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. My birthday rolled around a few weeks later, and for once, I decided to ask for something. I approached Dad cautiously. Hey Dad, I was wondering, could I maybe get a laptop for my birthday? I could pick up some freelance work online, make some extra money. Before Dad could respond, Sarah swooped in, her face twisted with anger. A laptop? Are you serious, Alice? You're already living here free, eating our food, and now you want more. Her voice dripped with venom. You're nothing but a money-grubbing freeloader. I stood there, shocked into silence as she continued her tirade. Have you no shame? Your father just paid for your entire college education, and here you are asking for more expensive gifts. She was on a roll now, tears springing to her eyes in a dramatic display. What about Tommy's future? At this rate, he'll never be able to go to college because his greedy sister is bleeding us dry. Sarah, that's enough. Dad's voice cut through her performance. We have a separate account for Tommy's college fund. It's all taken care of, so please calm down. Sarah huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I'm sorry about that, Alice. We'll talk about the laptop later, okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As soon as I could, I escaped to the backyard for some air. Sitting on the old swing set, I let the tears I'd been holding back fall freely. Sarah's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. I wiped my eyes, a new resolve settling over me. I wouldn't ask for anything ever again. I'd find a way to make it on my own without their help or their judgment. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, life decided to prove me wrong. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when all hell broke loose. Dad burst into the living room, his face red with fury. Where is it? He bellowed, making me jump. Where's my damn money? Sarah and Tommy came running, eyes wide with shock. I sat there, frozen, as Dad continued his tirade. Someone's been using my card, the one for Tommy's college fund. He was pacing now, hands shaking. Jewelry stores, electronics. Who the hell's been spending my money? His eyes landed on me, narrowing with suspicion. Alice, did you take my cards? Have you been in my wallet? I felt like I'd been doused in ice water. What? No, Dad. I would never. But he wasn't listening. He was on a rampage, tearing through the room like a tornado. John, check her backpack. It's right there. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. Before I could protest, Dad grabbed my bag. I watched in horror as he dumped its contents onto the couch. Books, papers, pens, and there, gleaming in the midst of it all, was a brand new laptop. The room fell silent. I stared at the laptop, my mind reeling. I hadn't bought this. Dad's voice was dangerously low. You thieving little. Dad, no. I didn't do this. I pleaded, panic rising in my throat. I don't know where that came from. And jewelry. Why would I buy jewelry? Call the police. Check the store cameras. You'll see it wasn't me. But my words fell on deaf ears. Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of righteous indignation. John, can't you see? She has no respect for you. She's lying to your face. Even with the evidence right in front of her, she turned to me, eyes glinting with triumph. We should have known you'd do something like this, always wanting more, never satisfied with what you have. Dad's next words hit me like a physical blow. Get out. What? I whispered, not believing what I was hearing. Get out of my house, he roared. You ungrateful. I never want to see you again. Get your things, then leave. Now, numbly, I gathered what I could. Clothes, toiletries, my phone charger. It all went into a duffel bag I found in the closet. The whole time, Dad stood there watching me with a mixture of anger and disgust that broke my heart. As I headed for the door, Sarah's parting shot hit me. We should have done this years ago. Good riddance to bad rubbish. The door slammed behind me. And just like that, I was alone, homeless, accused of a crime I didn't commit. As the reality of my situation sank in, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The house behind me had stopped being a home long ago. Maybe this was the push I needed to truly start my own life. That first night after being kicked out was a blur. I found myself in a dingy hostel, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the lumpy mattress, my mind racing with unanswered questions and fear for the future. The next day at work, I must have looked as lost as I felt. My colleague, Jessica, cornered me in the break room. "All right, spill it. What's going on with you?" she demanded, her concern evident. Before I knew it, I was pouring out the whole sordid story. Jessica listened, her eyes widening with each new detail. "That's insane," she said when I finished. Then, without missing a beat, "Move in with me. I've been looking for a roommate anyway. We can split the rent. It'll be perfect." And just like that, I had a lifeline. I moved in with Jessica that weekend, grateful beyond words for her kindness. 2 years passed in a whirlwind. I threw myself into work, determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I could make it on my own. I didn't speak to Dad at all during this time. The pain of his betrayal was still too raw. Mom tried to reach out a few times, but our conversations were strained. It was clear Dad had told her about the alleged theft. Her disappointment was palpable, even over the phone. Eventually, those calls stopped too. But life has a way of moving forward, whether you're ready or not. I got promoted at work and started earning enough to consider my own place. I picked up new hobbies: yoga, painting, anything to keep my mind occupied. I even started dating again, though nothing serious. Finally, I took the plunge and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. No judgmental stares, no walking on eggshells, just peace and independence. I was just settling into my new routine when the unexpected happened. There was a knock at my door one Saturday afternoon. I opened it, and there stood Dad. He looked older, more haggard than I remembered. His eyes were red-rimmed, like he'd been crying. "Can I come in?" He choked out. "Your mother gave me the address." "Alice, I need to talk to you." I stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw him out like he'd done to me. But another part, a part one thought I'd buried, wanted desperately to hear what he had to say. Dad took a deep breath. "I found out what really happened 2 years ago," he began, his voice shaking. "It wasn't you. It was Sarah." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "She framed you. She's the one who took my credit cards, who bought all that stuff. I found jewelry, clothes, all hidden away in her things. Price tags still on them and everything." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dad's words washed over me, each one a mix of vindication and reopened wounds. I sat there, stunned, as Dad continued his story. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and regret as he recounted the events that led to this moment after he found the jewelry. "I started paying closer attention," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "One night, I caught Sarah red-handed going through my wallet. She was taking my credit cards. Alice, I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time I'd been right, but the vindication tasted bitter." Dad went on, his words tumbling out faster now. "I confronted her, and it all came spilling out. She'd been shopping compulsively for years. At first, she said it was all for Tommy, but now she's maxed out credit cards and taken out loans, all for stuff we don't need." I shook my head, disbelief warring with a perverse sense of satisfaction. "And the laptop. The one you found in my bag. Dad's face crumpled. She planted it there. Bought it with my card and slipped it into your things. God, Alice, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. The apology hung in the air between us, heavy and insufficient. I told her she needed help. Dad continued, begged her to see a therapist to get treatment for her shopping addiction, but she refused. Said there was nothing wrong with her. I could picture it, Sarah, defiant and unapologetic, just like sheep in the day they kicked me out. Then Dad's voice dropped to a near whisper. She said she was right to frame you, that she'd do it again if she had the chance. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the couch, steadying myself. That was it for me. Dad said I filed for divorce the next day, kicked her out of the house. I couldn't live with someone who'd hurt my daughter like that. He looked at me then, his eyes pleading. Alice, I know I don't deserve it, but please, can you forgive me? I was blind and stupid, and I hurt you so badly. I'm so sorry. I stared at him, this man who had once been my hero, the father who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to ride a bike. The same father who'd thrown me out without a second thought, who'd believed the worst of me so easily. For a moment, I was that scared, heartbroken girl again, standing on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. The pain of that betrayal washed over me anew. Dad, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I can't forgive you. Not now, maybe not ever. You didn't just kick me out. You believed I could do something so terrible. You didn't even try to hear my side. And for 2 years, Dad, you didn't call, didn't check if I was okay. Dad nodded, tears streaming down his face. I understand, he choked out. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I needed you to know the truth. I stood up, suddenly needing space. Thank you for telling me, but I think you should go now. As the door closed behind him, I sank to the floor, emotions overwhelming me. The truth was out, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like reopening a wound that had never really healed. After Dad left, I thought I'd finally have peace, but life had other plans. My phone started ringing incessantly, Mom trying to play peacemaker. Alice, honey, she pleaded, your father is truly sorry. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him? Each call left me more frustrated than the last. Mom, please, I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but she wouldn't let up. One evening, I opened my door to find both my parents standing there. What are you doing here? I demanded, anger bubbling up inside me. Mom pushed past me into the apartment, Dad trailing behind, looking sheepish. Alice, this has gone on long enough, she started, her voice stern. Your father made a mistake, but he's apologized. You have no right to hold this grudge. Think of all the good things he's done for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. No right? He kicked me out. He believed I was a thief. Where was all this support when I was sleeping on a friend's couch, trying to rebuild my life? Mom started to argue, but I interrupted her. No, I'm finished. Come on out, you two. And don't return. I'll obtain a restraining order if you persist in this. I mean it. If the circumstance hadn't been so unpleasant, their shocked expressions would have been hilarious. Dad placed a hand on Mom's arm just as she was about to shout. Silently, he whispered, "We understand, Alice. We'll leave. However, if and when you're ready, I'll be here." I was both relieved and worn out when the door shut behind them. In need of some tranquility to recover, I collapsed into my couch. Life continued as the weeks went by. I poured myself into my work, taking comfort in the regularity of daily existence. I ran across Sarah, my ex-stepmother, one day when I was getting coffee. She had her phone up to her ear as she left a casino. I heard her remark, I know I owe you, but I'm sure I'll win it back this time. I simply need a bit more time. I ducked out of sight, feeling a wave of satisfaction and sympathy. She was still in denial that her actions had cost her everything. On occasion, I received text messages from my stepbrother Tommy. These were brief, uncomfortable conversations that never went deep. Now that he was in college, he was attempting to follow in my footsteps. It appeared like he was avoiding the family conflict. Months became a year. I got to know Mark. Mark is understanding, humorous, and kind. He inquired about my family as our relationship became more serious. I told him everything. "Wow," he exclaimed, embracing me. "You've experienced a lot. I'm here to support you no matter what you decide with your parents." I never imagined that I would have to make this choice, but now I find myself sitting here, spinning the engagement ring on my finger. I'm still not sure if I want my parents to attend our wedding, which is in a few months. A part of me wants to try to salvage our relationship from the ashes by offering an olive branch. Another part of me is afraid of exposing myself once more and allowing them to return. 2 envelopes, one for Mom and one for Dad, are placed aside on my coffee table while I glance at the save the date cards. I am paralyzed with uncertainty as my pen hovers over them. Finally, I put down the pen. It's all right if I'm not ready to make this decision just yet. I've discovered that forgiveness cannot be coerced and that mending takes time. I'm Mia, and I want to tell you a tale. I was around 6 or 7 years old when it all started. At that point, my parents divorced. Harold, my father, was no longer able to cope. For years, my mother, Isabella, had been pursuing him, constantly reminding him that he wasn't earning enough money. She repeatedly denigrated him and made him feel unworthy. One day, I recall my dad coming home ecstatic about getting promoted at work. For once, he was pleased with himself, and his smile was the widest. However, Mom just glanced at him and remarked, "That's it. I believed you had at last secured a legitimate job." I saw the happiness leave his face. It resembled the gradual deflation of a balloon. Dad departed shortly after that. I can see why now that I'm older, but at the time, it seemed like everything was falling apart. Mom regarded his departure as an opportunity. She soon saw how she might take advantage of the poor single mother narrative. When she went to work, she would pretend to be depressed in front of her employer. She would wipe phony tears and say, "I'm so sorry I'm late again, Mr. Frank. I didn't have anyone to help when Mia got sick." While Mom spent hours on her hair and cosmetics, I was content to stay at home and watch cartoons. Mr. Frank would stroke her hand and reassure her that she shouldn't worry. The worst events were family get-togethers. When Dad abandoned us and left us with nothing, Mom would take center stage and tell everyone about it in dramatic fashion. Even though I knew that wasn't true, I would writhe in my chair and never dare to speak. I knew better than to bring Mom into disrepute in public, even at that age. Dad was sending money every month, but no one knew. What he termed it was child support. "Look at this, Mia," Mom would remark, waving those checks in my face whenever they arrived. "According to your father, this meager sum is sufficient to rear a child." Horrible. I simply knew that it infuriated her. I had no idea how much it was supposed to be. And my life became much more difficult when Mom was upset. I started to notice things as I grew older, such as Mom's occasional gaze on me. When she saw anything that she didn't like, her eyes would narrow. I later understood that it was because I resembled Dad too much, and those were not joyful memories for her. Nevertheless, she kept me around. You see, I was beneficial. It was impossible to ignore the picture of the suffering single mother with her courageous little daughter. She received pity, preferential treatment, and even some government assistance as a result. Then things changed once again when I was around 10 years old. Mom met Jack, a successful and wealthy man. All of a sudden, being a struggling single mother was no longer so desirable. She now had a new character to play, that of the loyal spouse of a prosperous businessman. Furthermore, I no longer fit that image. It began modestly. I never had anything clean to wear to school because Mom would forget to wash my clothing. I would arrive in rumpled, discolored clothing, feeling ashamed as the other children pointed and murmured. Then there was the matter of the food. When Mom prepared elaborate meals for her and Jack, the home would smell of delectable food. However, when I arrived at the table, she would exclaim, "Oh, Mia, I apologize. For 3, I didn't create enough. Why don't you prepare a sandwich for yourself?" With my tummy rumbling, I would head to the kitchen and prepare a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. In the dining room, I could hear Mom and Jack giggling, and the sound of wine glasses clinking made my meager dinner seem even more insignificant. When Mother began interfering with my schooling, it was the worst. I would labor on a project for hours on end, only to have it disappear the following morning. I would arrive at school with nothing and find it difficult to explain the situation to the instructor. My professors began to look at me with concern as my grades began to decline. Jack didn't appear to notice any of this. He was constantly preoccupied with his job, and when he was at home, he focused entirely on Mom. She did a fantastic job portraying the devoted wife. She would stroke his shoulders and say, "Jack, darling, you work so hard. You ought to take a vacation." He would smile as he gazed up at her, completely enthralled. He would ask, "Isabella, what would I do without you?" When Mom revealed she was pregnant, things became worse. Mom took full advantage of Jack's excitement. She would lie on the couch and tell me, "The doctor says I need lots of rest. Will you be kind and clean the house?" While Mom napped or talked on the phone with friends, I spent my days cleaning. She would gently get up and cradle her hardly noticeable baby bulge when Jack got home. She would remark, "Oh, honey, I'm so tired." Having a baby requires a lot of work. "Sit down, my love," Jack would remark in a frightened hurry. "Bring your mom some water, Mia." As the months went by, I felt more and more alone. I started pulling away from my friends at school, too ashamed to invite them over to my house. At home, I felt like a stranger. I was more like a servant, expected to do whatever Mom wanted. One night, I was in bed, listening to Mom and Jack excitedly talking about nursery designs, and something inside me snapped. I couldn't handle it anymore. I needed to get out. With shaky hands, I picked up my phone and did something I had never dared to do before. I called my dad and told him everything. The neglect, the mind games, the constant feeling of being unwanted. Dad listened quietly, the only sound being his breathing, letting me know he was still there. When I finally stopped talking, there was a long silence. Then he said, "Pack your bags. I'm coming to get you." His voice was firm and serious. The next morning, I got up early, my heart beating fast with a mix of excitement and fear. I had already packed my bags the night before, too anxious to sleep. As I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, I heard Mom's voice coming from the kitchen. "Going somewhere, Maya?" she asked. I froze, expecting a big fight. But when I turned around, I saw her leaning against the doorway with a strange smile on her face. She actually looked relieved. "I'm going to live with Dad," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. To my surprise, Mom's smile grew even wider. "Well, it's about time," she said, almost cheerful. "Jack and I could use the extra space for the baby." Her words hit me hard, like a slap in the face. Before I could say anything, I heard a car horn outside. Dad was here. Mom walked me to the door, that unsettling smile still on her face. "Have a good life, Mia," she said, almost pushing me out the door. As I walked to Dad's car, I glanced back. Mom was standing in the doorway, actually happy, waving goodbye. It was the happiest I'd seen her in years, and it was because I was leaving. Dad's apartment was small, but it felt more like home than any place I'd lived in a long time. We didn't stay there for long, though. Over the next few months, I watched in amazement as Dad's business took off. It seemed like every week he had good news: a new contract, a big client, or plans to expand. Within a year, we were looking at houses in the best neighborhoods in the city. The house we bought was incredible: 2 stories of modern design with huge windows, and a backyard that looked like something out of a magazine. My room was bigger than our entire old apartment. Dad worked long hours managing his now successful business, and I put my energy into turning our big house into a real home. I learned to cook fancy meals, filling the house with delicious smells. I kept everything clean, managed the staff, and even started a vegetable garden in the big backyard. As the months went by, everything began to change. I watched as Dad's hard work kept paying off. His business kept growing, and our life got even better. I transferred to the best private school in the city, and on my 18th birthday, Dad gave me a huge surprise: a brand new luxury SUV. "Now you can drive yourself to school in style," he said with a smile, tossing me the keys, "and maybe run some errands for your old man." As I got used to my new life, I thought about Mom less and less. She never reached out to me, and I didn't try to contact her or any of my relatives on her side. The hurt was still too fresh, and the memories were too painful. Instead, I focused on my studies. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was graduating from college with honors. As I stood on the stage holding my diploma, I looked out into the crowd for Dad. He was there, smiling with pride, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. This was what it felt like to be truly loved. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside with a grin. "I have something for you," he said, his eyes shining. He handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's for your new apartment in the city center. Consider it a graduation gift." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." A few years went by after I graduated from college. My career was going well. I had a beautiful apartment in the city, and life was good. Dad and I had settled into a comfortable routine: weekly dinners and long phone calls. Everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. The news hit like a lightning bolt on a sunny day. Dad was sick. Cancer. Advanced. The doctor's words blurred into a mix of medical terms, but the main point was clear: it was serious. From that moment on, my world became all about saving Dad. I took a break from work and moved back into his house to take care of him. Every moment of my day was focused on his care. I researched treatments, talked to specialists, and even looked into alternative therapies, anything that might give us a chance. The following months were a tough mix of hope and despair. For every good day when Dad felt well enough to sit outside or enjoy a meal, there were 3 bad ones, full of pain and sickness from the treatments. One evening, after a particularly hard day, I was helping him back to bed. He turned to me with a serious expression. "Mia," he said softly, his voice just above a whisper, "I need you to promise me something." I nodded, unable to speak because of the lump in my throat. "Promise me you'll live your life," Dad said. "Really live it. Don't let this hold you back." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was going to be fine, but we both knew that that wasn't true. So instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "I promise, Dad." He passed away 3 weeks later. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, telling him how much I loved him and how grateful I was for everything he had done for me. The next few days were a blur. I felt numb as I went through the motions of arranging the funeral. There were so many things to take care of: the casket, the flowers, the obituary. It all felt unreal, like I was planning something for someone else. I was at the funeral home trying to choose music for the service when my phone buzzed. The call was from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello. Mia, it's your mother." I nearly dropped the phone. After all these years of silence, she was calling now. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "I heard about Harold," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I'd like to help with the funeral arrangements." I wanted to hang up, to tell her to leave me alone, but I was so tired, so overwhelmed, and a small part of me, a part I thought I had buried long ago, longed for a mother's comfort. "Okay," I heard myself say. "You can help." As I ended the call, I had a nagging feeling that I had just opened a door I should have kept closed. But with Dad gone, Mom was the only family I had left. Mom showed up at the funeral home an hour after the call, with my half-brother Brian. He was about 15 now, tall and awkward. I watched as Mom fussed over him, straightening his tie and smoothing his hair. It hurt seeing her shower Brian with the care and attention I had never received. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Despite my hesitation, I gave her tasks to handle. To my surprise, Mom was actually helpful. She managed the catering, arranged the flowers, and dealt with a constant flow of people offering their condolences. The funeral itself went by in a haze. I remember standing there, numb, as people I barely knew came up to offer their sympathy. Mom stayed close, her hand sometimes touching my arm, as if to comfort me. It felt strange to have her there, acting like a mother after so many years of neglect. After the service, when people were leaving the cemetery, Mom came up to me again. "Mia," she said, "I know this might not be the right time, but I'd like to stay in touch. Maybe we could get coffee sometime." I stared at her, this woman who had made my childhood so difficult, who had been happy to see me leave. But now she was the only family I had left. "Maybe," I said at last. "I'll think about it." To my surprise, Isabella actually kept her word. In the weeks that followed, she called me often, her voice always full of concern. "How are you doing, sweetie?" she'd ask. "Do you need anything?" At first, I was distant, giving short answers, not trusting her. But as the days went by and I started feeling the weight of Dad's absence, I found myself wanting some kind of connection, even if it was with Isabella. Our conversations started simple. She asked about my job, my apartment, my friends. But over time, her questions began to shift. "Your father's business," she'd mention casually. "I hope it's not too much for you. Harold always worked so hard." I would quickly change the subject. The truth was, I was overwhelmed. Dad had left me everything. The company, the real estate. It was a lot to handle. And deep down, some part of me, sharpened by years of dealing with Isabella, told me to stay quiet about it. As the weeks turned into months, Isabella's hints became less subtle. "Brian is looking at colleges," she said during one call. "Tuition is so expensive these days. I don't know how we'll manage." I made a non-committal sound, my guard instantly up. Another time, she said, Jack had some setbacks at work. "The economy is hitting everyone hard." It seemed like every conversation turned into a talk about money and their struggles, and each time I felt the pressure in her words. Despite my doubts, Isabella's sudden acts of kindness began to break down my defenses. Against my better judgment, I started to help out with small amounts of money. It started innocently, paying for Brian's SAT prep classes, buying Isabella a new laptop when hers broke, even covering a month's rent when Jack's company hit a rough patch. "You're an angel, Maya," Isabella would say. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Each time she said it, I felt a warmth inside me. Was this what it was like to have a real family? Meanwhile, I threw myself into running Dad's company. I promoted his trusted deputy to director while I remained the owner, making all the big decisions. It was hard work, but sitting in Dad's old office made me feel closer to him. As time went on, Isabella's requests became more frequent and bigger. What started as occasional help turned into regular expectations. The breaking point came one sunny Sunday afternoon. I was knee-deep in quarterly reports when Isabella called. "Mia, darling," she began, her voice overly sweet. "We've been thinking. It's been so long since we had a proper family vacation. We found this amazing package deal for a European tour." My stomach dropped. "Isabella, I don't know," I started to say. "It would mean so much to Brian." She cut me off. "After all we've been through, don't you think we deserve a little happiness?" I felt guilt mixed with anger in my chest, and before I knew it, I had agreed to pay for their trip. But it didn't end there. The day after they got back, Isabella was on the phone again. "Now about Brian's college fund," she said, her tone this time demanding rather than sweet. "We'll need you to set that up right away. He's got his heart set on Boardtown, you know." Something inside me snapped. All the years of neglect, the emotional games, the manipulation, they all came crashing back. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "No more, Mom. I'm done." There was a pause. Then Isabella's voice turned cold. "After everything we've done for you, you ungrateful brat. How dare you turn your back on your family?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Family? You mean the mother who was happy to see me go, the one who made my childhood miserable." The argument exploded. Isabella dropped any pretense of kindness, throwing insults and accusations. I fought back, years of anger and pain spilling out. "You're just like your father," she spat. "Selfish and cold-hearted." Thank God for that, I shot back. At least he loved me. The line went dead. I stood there shaking, the phone clutched in my hand, the silence overwhelming. When a chance for a month-long business trip abroad came up, I grabbed it. It was the perfect escape, a chance to get away and clear my head. As I boarded the plane, I felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. Maybe some time and distance was exactly what I needed. After a month away, I was eager to get back to my own space. The trip had been successful but exhausting, and I couldn't wait to relax in my apartment. But when I turned the key in the lock, something felt wrong. I pushed the door open, and my heart sank. Everything was different. My carefully chosen furniture was gone, replaced by decorations I didn't recognize. A shocked couple stared at me from the couch. "Who are you?" I demanded, panic rising. "What are you doing in my apartment?" The man stood up, looking confused. "Your apartment? We bought this place a couple of weeks ago from a woman named Isabella." The world spun around me. Isabella, my mother. No, it couldn't be. There had to be some mistake. I stood there, my voice shaking. "I never sold this apartment. I've been out of the country." The couple looked at each other, clearly worried. "We have all the paperwork," the woman said, sounding unsure. "Maybe you should talk to your realtor." I stumbled out of the apartment, my mind spinning. My first thought was to call the police and report fraud, but something inside told me to confront Mom first. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. It rang once, twice. "Hello, Mia." Mom's voice was overly sweet. "How was your trip?" "Cut the nonsense, Mom," I snapped. "What did you do to my apartment?" There was a long pause, and then, to my shock, Isabella laughed, a cold, mocking laugh. "Oh, Mia," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "If you had just shared your money willingly, it wouldn't have come to this. You did this to yourself, you know." It felt like a punch in the stomach. You sold my apartment? How could you?" "I'm going to the police." "Oh, really?" Isabella interrupted, her voice suddenly hard. "You're going to report your own mother. Please, we both know you don't have the guts for that." The call ended abruptly, leaving me standing on the sidewalk, homeless and in shock. But her smug confidence lit a fire in me. Without thinking, I hailed a cab and told the driver to take me to Isabella and Jack's house. I pounded on the door, anger and adrenaline racing through me. Jack answered, looking confused. "Mia, what's going on?" I pushed past him into the house. "Where's Isabella?" I demanded. "She's not here," he said, looking even more bewildered. "Mia, what is this about?" In a rush, I told him everything. The apartment, Isabella's confession, all of it. As I spoke, I saw the color drain from Jack's face. "That's impossible," he said, stunned. "We don't need money for Brian's education. I've already set aside funds for that." We stared at each other, the truth slowly sinking in. With shaky hands, Jack started pulling out financial statements and credit card bills. As we went through them, the full story came out. Mom had secretly taken out loans and was drowning in debt. "I had no idea," Jack whispered, looking shocked. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. Jack had been just as deceived as I was. As the full extent of Isabella's lies came to light, a cold determination settled over me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was outright fraud. I knew what I had to do, and I didn't hesitate. I hung up with a 111 operator, feeling like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For too long, I had been Mom's victim, but not anymore. The ensuing inquiry was difficult, but it was necessary. More of Isabella's falsehoods were revealed with each new revelation. She had been leading a second life, not only forging my signature to sell my flat. The credit card bills displayed expensive clothing, upscale spa treatments, and stays at 7-star hotels, all of which were concealed from Jack and funded by a network of deceit and covert loans. Reporters flocked outside the courthouse in search of any tidbit of information as the trial descended into a media frenzy. A part of me was relieved to watch Isabella's flawless image crumble in front of everyone, even if I detested being in the limelight. Justice was done in the end. Mom was convicted of forgery, fraud, and other offenses. "Mrs. Isabella Sermon, your actions show a complete disregard for the law and a betrayal of your family's trust," the judge said, and I can still clearly remember it. "I give you a 4-year prison term and mandate that you reimburse Mia Sermon for the whole cost of the apartment." Jack was stunned the entire time. He phoned me the day following the sentencing. "Mia," he began in a trembling voice, "I'm requesting full custody of Brian as part of my divorce proceedings. I can't allow her to be around him after what she did." I then began the process of restoring my life. I got my money back from the apartment and used it to start again by purchasing a modest home on the outskirts of the city. I worked hard to manage Dad's business and try my best to carry on his legacy. Although the job was difficult, it felt fantastic, and I felt like I was truly on my own for the first time. I keep in contact with Brian. Now that he's in college, Jack is fully behind him as he studies engineering. I'm glad we have some kind of relationship, even though it's a bittersweet one. Since the trial, Isabella has not gotten back to me. I have no idea if she has made an effort to get in touch, and to be honest, I don't want to know. I've moved on from that phase of my life. I'm Kate, and I was raised in a modest home that was always filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread. After school, I enjoyed helping Dad knead bread at the family bakery that he inherited from his parents. Mom was different. She made more money than Dad ever did as a realtor, always wearing dapper suits and high heels. When I was 12 years old, gangly and ungainly, and more interested in reading than anything else, Mom phoned one evening and said, "Kate, come set the table." On the way, as I spread out the dishes, I dog-eared my page and screamed back. They started up again, I heard. Another slow month, Mom said in a tone full of contempt, "When are you going to straighten up?" Dad's response was kind. "Please, Sarah, don't stand in front of Kate." Oh, who gives a damn? Mom lost her temper. She ought to be aware of her father's lack of success. I held on to the table's edge and forced myself to hold back my tears. In our home, it was typical to see Mom making fun of Dad while Dad tried to maintain harmony. I was aware that Mom felt stuck in a life she never desired and was upset about more than simply money. "Kate," Mom gave a bark, "where is my wine?" With trembling hands, I quickly poured her a drink and put it down. The tablecloth was splattered with some. Mom's eyes blinked. "You worthless girl. Is there nothing you can do correctly?" Dad stepped in. "Sarah, it's only a little wine." Nothing was harmed. Mom gave him a fierce look. "You treat her too leniently. It's no surprise that she's becoming as pitiful as you." I buried my face in my pillow and ran to my bed. I had a deep affection for Dad, but I didn't understand why he tolerated Mom's behavior. For my part, I had mastered the art of being as discreet and silent as possible. When I woke up the following morning, the home was oddly quiet. No click of Mom's shoes, no scent of bread baking. Dad was seated at the kitchen table, his face pale as I slipped downstairs. "Where is Mom?" I inquired, even though I had a strong feeling that I already knew the answer. Dad handed me a note in Mom's beautiful handwriting without saying a word. "John, I can't do this anymore," it said. "I'm taking Richard with me. Instead of this all-town bullshit, he can offer me the life I deserve. Kate, you're simply dead weight that I don't need, so don't even attempt to locate me. You're a loser, John, and you've also made our daughter into one. Goodbye and goodbye." I felt as though I had been hit in the gut as I gazed at the page. Mom had left us, calling Dad a loser and me worthless in her farewell statement. The ensuing months were a haze of court cases and psychological distress. Dad petitioned to have Mom's parental rights revoked and filed for divorce. As we waited for Mom to arrive, I recall sitting in the chilly courthouse with my sweating hand gripping Dad's. She didn't. As the grown-up spoke, I fell asleep, only to pick up on phrases like abandonment and unfit parent. Dad squeezed my hand when it was done. "It's finished, Katie," he acknowledged quietly. "Your mother's parental rights have been terminated, and the divorce is official. Now it's just the two of us." With a mixture of relief and regret, I nodded. After that, life became more difficult. Dad put in a lot of effort and worked long hours in the bakery. I did the most of the chores even though I was only 12. After doing my homework when I got home from school, I would begin making supper and doing the wash. This pattern lasted for 3 years before things altered once more shortly after my 15th birthday. One day, Dad arrived home with a look of astonishment and sadness on his face. As he collapsed onto a kitchen chair, he muttered, "Uncle Pete died." I gave him a strong embrace and whispered, "Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry." He gave me a hug in return. Then with wide eyes, he withdrew. "You won't believe this, Katie. He bequeathed me about $300,000. His sole surviving relative is me. I'm not sure how to handle it all." However, Dad immediately figured it out. He used some of the funds to extend the menu and upgrade the bakery's equipment. Our small bakery became the buzz of the town in a matter of months. Before we realized it, Dad was establishing a second site across town, hiring additional employees and extending the hours. Dad had 3 successful bakeries by the time I was 16. Our concerns about money were vanished. I gave up my after-school employment to concentrate on my education. We even traveled to Europe for 2 weeks, which was our first actual vacation. Over the years, Mom faded into the background. Although Dad dated from time to time, he never showed any desire in getting married again. We were content just the way we were, so I didn't push it. High school graduation passed quickly, filled with tears and cap flinging. I had put in a lot of effort, and it had paid off. I was on my way to study finance at State University. Dad gave me a little package the morning I was scheduled to go. "What is this?" I opened it to discover a key and asked. Dad smiled. "Your present for graduating. It's an apartment close to the university. Rent and dorm life are no longer concerns." I was dumbfounded when I looked at him. "I can't, Dad. This is excessive." I protested, but he waved me away. "Katie, you deserved it. Go now and make me proud." College went by quickly. Determining to take use of the chance Dad had given me, I poured myself into my studies. I was working as an intern at nearby financial businesses while I wasn't in class or studying. I had a junior financial analyst position lined up by the time I graduated. I was standing in front of my apartment mirror on my first day of work, smoothing my blazer. "Kate, you've got this," I said to my mirror. "Make your father proud." Although the work was difficult, I enjoyed it. Instead of spending every bonus or increase I received, I invested it. I kept hearing Dad say, "Katie, money makes money. Use it wisely." Years passed. By the time I hit 32, those smart investments had paid off. I owned 2 more apartments in addition to the one I lived in, all bringing in steady rental income. Life was good. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Katie," Dad's voice sounded strained. "Can you come over? I need to talk to you about something." I found him sitting at his kitchen table, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "What is it, Dad?" I asked, fear clenching my stomach. He took a deep breath. "It's cancer, honey. Stage 4. The world tilted on its axis. "No," I whispered. There must be some mistake. But there wasn't. The next year was a hellish roller coaster of treatments, remissions, and relapses. I spent every free moment at the hospital or at Dad's house, making his favorite cheese soup, even when he was too nauseous to eat it. One crisp autumn day, I arrived at Dad's house to find him sitting in his favorite armchair, a serious look on his face. "We need to talk, Katie," he said, patting the seat next to him. "The doctors gave me 6 months, tops." "No," I said, shaking my head furiously. "They're wrong. We'll get a second opinion." "Katie," he interrupted gently, "it's okay. I've made my peace with it. I'm selling the bakeries. Everything's going to you. You'll be set for life." I pulled back, wiping my eyes. "I don't want your money, Dad. I want you." He smiled sadly. "I know, sweetheart, but this is how I can take care of you even when I'm gone. The next 7 months were precious and painful. We talked more than we ever had about everything and nothing. I memorized every line on his face, the sound of his laugh, the smell of sugar and flour that clung to him. Then on a quiet Wednesday morning, he was gone. The funeral was a blur. Afterward, I sat in Dad's empty house, clutching his favorite apron. The lawyer had already been by with the paperwork. True to his word, Dad had left me everything. I used the money from the bakeries to buy 2 more apartments. It felt right somehow, building something lasting just like Dad had done. A year after Dad's passing, I was just starting to find my footing again. Work kept me busy, and managing my rental properties gave me a sense of purpose. I'd settled into a new normal, or so I thought. Then came the call that turned everything upside down. "Kate, it's your mother. I'm back in town. I'd like to see you if you're willing." My mind raced. Part of me wanted to hang up to protect myself from the woman who'd abandoned me, but another part, the part that still held on to the little girl I once was, couldn't help but be curious. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Let's meet at Rosie's Cafe tomorrow at noon." The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. As the clock struck 12, I saw her walk in. She looked older, of course, but still elegant. But she wasn't alone. A young girl, maybe 17, trailed behind her. Mom spotted me and hurried over. "Kate, darling, you look wonderful. And this is Lily, your sister." I felt like I'd been slapped. My what? We sat down, and Mom launched into her story. How her lover Richard had left her shortly after Lily was born, how they'd struggled to make ends meet, and how she decided to come back to her hometown to start over. "I heard you have a rental property," she continued, her voice hopeful. I was wondering if maybe. She trailed off, but her meaning was clear. I looked at Lily, who was staring at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. I thought about Dad, about how he'd always taught me to be kind even when it was hard. I thought about the scared little girl I used to be, wishing for her mom to come back. "Okay," I heard myself say. "I have a unit that's just become available. You can stay there." Mom's face lit up. "Okay, thank you. We'll pay rent, of course." I held up a hand. "No rent, just utilities for now." As we hammered out the details, I watched Lily. She looked so young, so out of place. I remembered being her age, feeling lost and alone after Mom left. "So Lily," I said, trying to sound friendly, "you're what, a junior in high school?" She nodded, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Yeah, it's weird starting at a new school for senior year." I felt a pang of sympathy. "I bet. Listen, if you need help with anything, school stuff or just someone to talk to, I'm here." "Okay," Lily gave me a small smile. "Thanks, that means a lot." As we left the cafe, Mom hugged me again. "You're an angel, Kate. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I hope we can start fresh." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That night, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to get a lot more complicated. But for better or worse, my mother was back in my life, and I had a sister. Only time would tell what that would mean for all of us. The months following Mom and Lily's return were strange. Mom quickly found work as a realtor, slipping back into her old life as if she'd never left. Lily enrolled in the local high school for her senior year. I kept my distance, unsure how to navigate this new family dynamic. Occasionally, Mom would call or stop by. "Kate, darling, thank you again for the apartment." She'd gush, her smile wide and seemingly sincere. "You've been such a blessing." I'd nod, uncomfortable with her effusive gratitude. "It's fine, Mom. I'm glad I could help." Lily and I developed a cautious friendship. I'd help her with math homework or listen to her college plans. It was nice, in a way, having a sister, but there was always a barrier, the weight of the years we'd missed. Then came Lily's graduation. I attended the ceremony, watching from the back as she accepted her diploma. Mom beamed with pride, and for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine what life might have been like if she'd never left. The very next day, Mom showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was flushed, eyes blazing. "We need to talk," she snapped, pushing past me into the living room. I followed, confused. "What's going on?" I asked. She whirled on me. "Don't play dumb. I know about the apartments, Kate, all 4 of them." My stomach dropped. How had she found out? "What about them?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "You've been holding out on us," she shrieked, living the high life while Lily and I scraped by. I felt my temper rising. "Excuse me? You're living rent-free in one of those apartments." "That's not enough," she spat. "Half of those properties should be mine. I'm your mother." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was so absurd. "You can't be serious. You lost any claim to my property when you abandoned us, remember? No parental rights, no child support." She changed tack, then her voice suddenly pleading. "Kate, sweet, think about Lily. She needs money for college. If you just sold one apartment—" "Absolutely not." I cut her off. "Lily's education is not my responsibility." "How can you be so selfish?" Mom wailed. "After everything I've done for you." That was the last straw. "Everything you've done for me." I repeated, incredulously, "You mean abandoning me, calling me useless in your goodbye note? Or wait, do you mean living rent-free in my apartment for months?" Mom recoiled as if I'd slapped her. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, without another word, she turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, shaking with anger and hurt. How dare she? After everything, how dare she try to guilt me like this? I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. I'd known deep down that letting Mom back into my life was a risk. But I'd hoped, well, I wasn't sure what I'd hoped for. As the adrenaline faded, I felt a deep, aching sadness. This woman, who should have been my protector, my support, was nothing but a stranger who wanted to use me. And Lily, what was I going to do about Lily? 2 weeks after Mom's blow-up, I was grabbing coffee at my usual spot when I noticed the barista giving me odd looks. As I waited for my order, I overheard a snippet of conversation from a nearby table. Can you believe it? Charging her own mother rent when she's got all those apartments. I froze, sure they couldn't be talking about me, but they were. Over the next few days, I caught more whispers, more sidelong glances. It seemed Mom had been busy spreading her twisted version of events to anyone who would listen. Then came the Facebook post. I saw it during my lunch break and nearly choked on my sandwich. My daughter Kate has 4 apartments she rents out, making a fortune but refuses to help pay for her sister's college education. She's forcing me to pay exorbitant rent when I can barely make ends meet. I'm heartbroken that my own child could be so greedy and selfish. The comments poured in, each one a knife to my heart. How could she do that to her own mother? What a horrible person. I always knew there was something off about her. Friends, relatives, even old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years. All of them jumped on the bandwagon, shaming me for my supposed greed. Not one of them seemed to remember or care that this woman had abandoned me as a child. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my boss called me into his office. "Kate," he said, his face grave, "we need to talk about this situation with your mother." It's starting to affect the company's reputation. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sir, I can explain. He held up a hand. I'm not asking for details, but I need you to resolve this quietly and quickly. We can't have this kind of drama associated with our firm. Understand? I nodded numbly, not trusting myself to speak. Back at my desk, I found an email notification about unpaid utilities for Mom's apartment. Great, just great. With shaking hands, I dialed Mom's number. What do you want? She snapped by way of greeting. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, there are unpaid utility bills for your apartment. We agreed you'd cover those, remember? She scoffed. Oh, please, you're rolling in money from all those apartments. You can afford to pay a few bills. That's not the point, I said, my patience wearing thin. We had an agreement. An agreement? She interrupted. Like the agreement that you'd help your family? Fat lot of good that did us. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling like the world was crumbling around me. How had I let things get this far? I tried to do the right thing, to be kind and generous, and this was how I was repaid. With a heavy heart, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Miss Stevens, the lawyer said, reviewing my case, you have every right to evict your mother. She has no lease, pays no rent, and you've given her ample notice. Notice about the utility bills. I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and dread. What do I need to do? He handed me a document. This is an official eviction notice. Serve it to her, and if she doesn't comply, we can take legal action. Armed with the paper, I drove to Mom's apartment. My apartment, really. My hands shook as I knocked on the door. Mom answered, her face twisting with displeasure when she saw me. Oh, it's you. Have you finally come to your senses about selling an apartment for Lily's college? Lily's picked out her school. Tuition's due next month. My shock turned to anger. Are you serious right now? After everything you've done, you're still making demands. Don't be so dramatic, Mom scoffed. It's the least you can do for family. That was it, the last straw. I thrust the eviction notice at her. Here you have 30 days to vacate the premises. Mom stared at the paper, her face going pale. Then without warning, she exploded. You ungrateful little brute. She screamed, her voice echoing through the apartment. After everything I've done for you. I stood my ground. Everything you've done? You mean abandoning me, spreading lies about me? She lunged forward, her hand raised. I flinched, but the blow never came. Instead, she grabbed the front of my shirt, spitting insults in my face. You're nothing, you hear me? Nothing but a selfish heartless. I managed to break free, fumbling for my phone. That's it. I'm calling the police. Mom's eyes widened, but she didn't back down. She continued her tirade, her words becoming more vicious with each passing second. When the police arrived, I was shaking, tears streaming down my face. I showed them the eviction notice and explained the situation as calmly as I could. One officer said to Mom, I suggest you calm down and discuss this civilly with your daughter. Mom sneered. With her? She's trying to throw us out on the street. The other officer turned to me. Miss Stevens, legally this is a civil matter. We can't forcibly remove her without a court order. I'd suggest trying to work this out between yourselves or taking it to court if necessary. I nodded, feeling defeated. As the police left, Mom's triumphant smirk made my blood boil. You won't do it, she taunted. You don't have the guts to take your own mother to court. I stared at her, this woman who had given birth to me, but had never truly been a mother. In that moment, I felt something inside me harden. Watch me, I said, my voice low and steady. Before she could respond, I turned and walked away. As I reached my car, I heard the slam of the apartment door behind me. As I drove home, I thought about what lay ahead. A court battle, more drama, more pain, but also maybe a chance to finally break free from the toxic hold my mother had over me. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like I might throw up. As I walked into the courtroom, I saw Mom and Lily sitting on the opposite side. Mom's eyes were red and puffy, while Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. The proceedings began, and Mom put on quite a show. She wept dramatically, her voice breaking as she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she sobbed, "my daughter has become so cold-hearted. She's trying to throw her own mother and sister out on the streets after everything I've done for her." I clenched my fists, willing myself to stay calm. Then my lawyer stood up, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady and confident, "I'd like to present some evidence that paints a very different picture of the situation." He proceeded to lay out the facts. Mom's abandonment when I was 12, the termination of her parental rights, her failure to pay any child support. He showed the judge the documentation of the rent-free arrangement and the unpaid utility bills. But he wasn't done. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Stevens is not in fact in the dire financial straits she claims." Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide. My lawyer continued, "Mrs. Stevens owns an apartment in another city, left to her by her former partner. She currently rents out this property for a substantial monthly income." There was silence in the courtroom. With a severe frown, the judge turned to face Mom. "Mrs. Stevens, is this accurate?" Mom was looking pale. After opening and closing her mouth many times, she said, "Yes, Your Honor." When the judge handed down his decision, his voice was icy. "The eviction is granted by this court. In addition, Mrs. Stevens shall reimburse the rent for the month she lived in the flat without paying rent. Your behavior, Mrs. Stevens, is absolutely unacceptable. This case is over." With a resounding sound that seemed to reverberate throughout my body, the gavel fell. We had won, and it was over. I saw Lily as we were leaving the courthouse. My heart hurt for her because she appeared lost and perplexed. She was not at blame for this. Ignoring Mom's scowl, I approached her. "I'm sorry it came to this, Lily," I murmured quietly. "You may still get in touch with me if you need assistance, actual aid, okay?" With tears in her eyes, she nodded. "I apologize, Kate. I was unaware." I smiled sadly at her and turned to go, feeling as though a burden had been removed. Over the next few weeks, Mom and Lily left my flat. Through rumors, I learned that they had moved into Mom's other home. Neither they nor I made an effort to get in touch. Memories of the previous few months raced through my head as I stood in the now empty apartment. The anxiety of the court case, the anguish of Mom's treachery, and the joy I'd had when she returned. But I felt liberated beneath it all.